Hey everybody, welcome. I'm so excited that you took the time to be here. My name is Via Williams. I'm the Director of Growth for the Ben Kinney Companies, and we're a real estate company based here in Bellingham, Washington State. Actually, I personally am out of Kirkland, Washington. And we have 8 real estate brokerages here. We have tech companies, coaching companies, a big team that spans the United States and Canada, and are involved in a whole bunch of aspects of the real estate world. So we welcome you today. Ben Kinney and I formed a leadership mentorship group last year. And as part of that group, we do webinars. We do a lot of webinars. And we went through our first year and we reformed it this year to what we're kind of calling 2.0, second year in. And I decided to launch this series with a series of interviews with real estate icons. And it's been my absolute honor to do that so far. I interviewed Chris Suarez of Experience Real Estate Group a couple of weeks ago, interviewed the one and only Ben Kinney last Friday, and both of those replays are available on our YouTube channel. And when I made this up and decided that I was going to interview real estate icons, I texted Ben, Chris, and Bo and Kymber. I mean, pretty much simultaneously. So I think I emailed you guys or texted you guys like a month ago. It was a long time ago because I knew I've been dying to interview these guys. So it is really, really my honor today to get these guys to sit still for me for an hour in the middle of their
same room.
In the same room. Probably the most time they've had together all week. No, I'm kidding.
Not that far off.
I know. No, I get it. And so now don't blush. I'm going to give an intro for you guys. And here's the thing. The reason I give intros and kind of brag on the people that I bring on is because I think it's really important to know what the context is of who I'm talking to, right? It's really important to understand what their perspective is. And Bo and Kymber's resume is incredible. I could spend probably the hour going through it all. It's that impressive. And so with that said, I met Kymber when she was leading the Menkiti real estate group. And so Kymber was the director of sales for that. They've done over $1 billion in real estate sales, over 1,000 transactions, one real estate group. Bo founded that, and Kymber was the director of sales. And then they both own 8 now. Are we up to 8 guys?
7.
Seven real estate brokerages. Okay. They're up to 7 real estate brokerages that they own. And on top of that, they have a very, very robust and growing development company in the Washington, D.C. metro area. They have 1.5 million square feet right now. And they do, correct me if I'm wrong, guys, residential and retail. Is that right?
Yeah, yep. Residential, commercial.
Multifamily.
Multifamily. Okay, perfect. Besides that, Bo was a 30 under 30 for the Realtor Association. Kymber was a 40 under 40 for the Business Journal in Washington, D.C. And they are both involved in a ton of civic boards and whatnot. Kymber, are you the president of your Realtor Association this year? Is this your year?
Yes.
This is my year.
This is your year.
Unique year, but yeah.
And on top of all of this, like I could have gone, list of all the boards and commissions they're on. Check this out, you guys. They have 4 kids under 12, and one of them's a 6-month-old baby.
All boys.
All boys. So you can see why I wanted to interview them. It's pretty incredible. So if you haven't joined us before in one of our Wednesday webinars, definitely feel free to, put questions or comments in chat. I try to check that from time to time. Certainly afterwards, I check it. And you can just learn from them. I think today, as we move into your turn to talk, I wanted to set the stage by saying, I think that for you guys, this is going to be a wealth building biography, right? I think that part of what makes your story amazing, you guys, is that you have built wealth for not just yourself, but for others in your community. And I think that's really, really amazing and something we can all learn from. With that said, I want to go back a little bit. Bo, You grew up in Massachusetts, you went to Harvard, and you came to DC. What got you to DC?
A job got me to DC originally.
It's either a woman or a job, Bo.
It was a job originally. I was originally going to move to Atlanta. So I grew up in Somerville, in a working class neighborhood in Somerville, Massachusetts. Ended up having an opportunity through sports to go to a school called Roxbury Latin that changed sort of the trajectory of my life and set me up for the opportunity to go to Harvard. And I got a job in DC, and that was kind of how I ended up here. I didn't know what I was doing, and got in my little beat up truck and drove down to DC and set up shop.
What sport?
I played both ice hockey and baseball in college.
Oh, wow. I did not know that. So you played hockey and baseball for Harvard, 2 sports.
Yeah.
We
can never just do one thing, right? We like
amazing. That's amazing. Well, Kymber, you're from Virginia, so you're basically a local girl, right? And I think, it's equally impressive, 2 master's degrees, right? You got a master's degree in social work and one from law from Bryn Mawr in Philadelphia. Then you came back to DC. What brought you back?
So mine was a boy. So what originally brought me to DC was doing an internship, because Bo and I actually worked together. That's how we met at College Summit, which is a nonprofit that helps low-income high school seniors get into college. And so I'd come to DC for a short bit right before I went to do grad school after college. And so met Bo during that summer, went away to work on my master's degree, and came back for a job, but really for the boy that was close to the job.
Yeah, for the boy that would really change the trajectory of your life, really.
Yeah.
Pretty amazing. So you guys both ended up in nonprofit, right? Is that correct?
Yeah. Yep.
Okay. So here we are, talking about this massive real estate empire, and you started in nonprofit. So where's the bridge? How did we get from nonprofit to real estate?
Yeah. So I guess I started out in, so before nonprofit, I was in corporate strategy work. And I had always had this passion and had worked in the nonprofit sector my whole life before that. And so I ended up as the chief operating officer of an organization called College Summit that worked with low-income high school students to apply to college. And that's actually where we met. And I think one piece that's going to come back up, I'm sure, knowing how deep you dig, is that the tagline of College Summit was let talent shine, let talent shine. And this idea of finding and shining a spotlight on and curating talent and capability that's overlooked, I think, is a theme for Kymber and I in our lives. I was living in the Columbia Heights neighborhood in Washington, D.C. I bought my first house, and it was kind of like the real world. There was an 8-bedroom house, and we rented out to a whole bunch of friends and everything. I was trying to figure out how to pay the mortgage. There was an elderly lady who lived next door named Mrs. Bex, who'd lived there for 65 years. And I used to help her with her trash and her groceries. And I came back from College Summit was spreading, the nonprofit was growing. I thought I was doing great work. I was doing the Lord's work and using my skills. Mm-hmm. And I came back one day and Mrs. Bex had passed away. Mm-hmm. And it kind of had a pretty profound effect on me, because I thought I was kind of changing the world. I was doing all this great work, and I wasn't even present for the lady who was right on the other side of this little row house wall. And I found her body. Nobody had checked on her. Oh, and I started asking this question of what could I do that would have more of an impact in my neighborhood right here where I am, right? And so I looked around, and there was a metro stop a block and a half away. And other than my house and the other house, everything else was vacant. I said, well, I should fix up some of these vacant houses. That'll make my neighborhood better. And I know anything about anything. So I said, I'll get a real estate license. That will teach me how to fix up houses. Brilliant. So I got a real estate license, and I was running an organization. I was very busy. But I said, I want to try and use this real estate license. So I walked into a real estate, good lesson for all our part-time realtors out there. I walked into one of the major companies here, this office that I knew about in Chevy Chase Circle. And they said, we don't take part-time people. We don't have space for you. You can't work here. We come back if you want to be full-time. So I said, but I run this company. I understand real estate. No, we don't. So I found this little teeny office that would actually take me as a part-time real estate agent. And I went back to doing my work. And a little bit later, I had 6 weeks off, and I had to take this 6-week vacation. I made this policy, you got to take a third of your vacation time or something. So I had to do that. And I didn't have anything to do. So I said, I'm going to activate my license. And I ended up selling 6 houses in 6 weeks. And
whoa, what?
An amazing, amazing business. And so that's how it started. I got into it. I convinced Kymber that if I got into real estate, I'd have more time to spend with her. That was kind of a lie. But
this little office is right around the corner from my apartment, so it was supposed to be this great
Okay, wait.
strategy.
Hold on. I have to rewind, Bo. There's 2 things that you very casually said that we are going to go back to. One of them is you casually mentioned that you bought a house.
Mm-hmm.
Now, I don't want to speak for our other listeners and viewers, but a lot of people don't buy homes in their mid-20s. So what gave you the nudge to do that?
So a little bit of it came from this perspective. There were 2 things that I learned from my dad, right? You got to go to school and you got to buy a house. Like those were the 2 things that in my dad's like view of the world. And I totally failed at the schooling thing because Nigerian family, I should be on my 6th PhD and I didn't even get a master's. Kymber reminds me.
You went to Harvard and you think you failed?
She's more educated. She's more educated than me. But yeah, so I had bought this house and I really couldn't afford it. Like I found this house that I really liked. And I left the corporate world. I had this corporate job for like a year and a half. And then I went into the nonprofit world. And so my compensation had dropped. And so I didn't have it was struggle. So what I was pretty social. So I corralled a whole bunch of my friends. And we had a little United Nations of different people and friends from college and friends I met in DC and we had 2 people come from the Czech Republic and live with us. So we had a 8-bedroom house. There were 2 bedrooms in the basement, 6 upstairs. And keeping it run as a group house is how I paid the mortgage and made things. And it was a credit line on that first house that financed our entire business.
Isn't that amazing? That's amazing to me. And then the second thing you just threw in there casually is that you sold 6 homes in 6 weeks. And for anybody watching or listening who is not in real estate, that is shocking. It is that level of production is for the elite. Because that's a pace, Bo, of 48 homes a year. So you're saying you in your first 6 weeks of real estate you sold 6 homes. How did you do that?
Yeah, they didn't all close in the first 6 weeks, but I
Sure.
6 homes under contract in the first 6 weeks. It was partly I think a couple of different things. One, the age. I was the age where people were starting to think about homes. I had been the first person in my social circle to buy a house. And so everybody looked to me as kind of the person who'd taken the leap and bought a house. And I really reached out, and I think I'd established I was probably a little old spirit for my age. I think people thought of me as someone who they could sort of work with them and move forward. And so it was mostly sold to coworkers and friends that I had from the time who were all ready to make that move. And actually the sixth house I sold was to the marketing director from my former company. Her name's Sumi Kim. And at the closing, she bought this cute little condo, and she's this really feisty lady. And we sit down at the closing, and she looks across the table. We're having that moment, the closing moment where you're like, oh, this is so great. They're buying the house. She looks at me and she goes, hey, Bo, I think you're going to make it in this business. And she says, but there's one problem. Like, you're not that organized and you don't have it together. So I'm going to quit my job and I'm going to come work for you.
And you're going to hire me.
So here I was, a part-time agent. I sold my 6th house, and she tells me she's quitting her job and hired. So my first employee hired themselves, and it was Sumi who built a lot of the systems and structures of the early part of the business.
I mean, you talk about the stars aligning in your life to set you up in this career, right? That's amazing. Kymber, where were you during all this?
So we were dating during this time, and I'm still working. I'm a nonprofit. I was actually working for the Archdiocese of Washington as a counselor. And so, I was watching all this sort of take shape. And, Bo really was sort of saying, hey, this is going to be amazing because I'm going to start this company and we're going to have all this time. And so we literally are like getting engaged, getting married. I bought my first house, so Bo sells me my first house during this time. With
you're going to get clients if you're dating someone.
I think
you hire them and marry them, apparently.
Like, yeah, you guys should totally buy this house. So I'm 22, like literally barely out of grad school, making like $35,000 a year. And Bo was like, you can totally buy a house. You can totally buy a house. And so I bought it, and 2 years later, sell it when we get married and make more money on the sale of that house than I had made as a social worker for the prior 2 years. So think about like that trajectory, right? It couldn't have been more powerful to see the impact and the transformation that wealth can have, or real estate and equity, because then that also then became additional leverage into the business as we begin to grow out the development company.
So is that what got you to leave nonprofit to go into real estate, Kymber? What was the moment?
No, it wasn't. There wasn't.
So Bo's launching the first KW in Washington, D.C. We go home. We just got married. We're home for Christmas. Bo is homeschooled.
And my mom was a teacher, so there's a big chalkboard. On the kitchen wall, there's a big chalkboard where I had to learn as a boy.
Wow.
So his mom, being very curious, says, well, explain this business to me that you're in. So it's literally me, his mom and dad sitting in the kitchen on these little stools, and Bo's at the chalkboard drawing out the vision for this business. And his mom, as he's going through it and saying, actually, like he was going to do away with the residential sales team and just really focus on brokerage. And he was so excited about brokerage and development. And his mom, right, very sweetly says, well, how does the business make money? And he was like, well, it makes money in the sales team, but I don't need a sales team. I'm not going to have a sales team. And I'm thinking to myself, wait a minute, I'm a social worker. And the one thing that you have that generates income, you're not going to do anymore. So I, of course, am like, well, I'll get my license. And that way I can part-time, I'll just be able to help the thing that generates income for the business.
Kind of the way we think. I'm thinking long-term, what are we going to build? And Kimber's like, well, how do we make money today? What's wrong with this thing?
Perfect. I mean, that's perfect. We're going to dive into that. Working together as a husband and wife. Did you guys talk about, did you enter marriage thinking you would work together, that you would build an empire together?
No, not at all.
I don't think we entered marriage thinking we'd work together. We definitely entered marriage thinking we were building some crazy thing.
No.
And I mean, you've come really, you've become one of the power couples of DC. One of the questions, I'm just going to flat out ask you right now, do either of you have political aspirations?
I think we did, and now we don't.
Bo didn't answer.
Yeah.
Which means he does.
The more exposed to politics, the more I appreciate what it takes to thrive and make a difference in that environment. I think that it is a way that people can have an impact, but it's a very tough business. And I think that I much prefer making that impact from the private sector. Mm-hmm. I think, the only way, I think Kymber thought about it for a while. She thought about it. But I think the only way you'd want to do that is when you were retired or something.
So what I want is for everybody watching and listening, if you're watching this live, to get on chat and tell me if you also think that was a political yes. All right, I'm going to keep going. All right. So you're, I gotta know. Someone disagrees with me, so there you go. All right. I could see, Bo, I can totally see you as like the future mayor of Washington, D.C. There, I said it. Or not, depending on what you guys want. All right.
Or the first guy, or whatever it's called. Because Matt Perry's making sure to remind me.
If Kymber
at my home, so I'm cool with that.
If Kymber ever wanted to run for anything, she would have a huge tribe behind her. That's for sure. We would all love to support Kymber to do that. But
she'd get 5 votes. She'd definitely get 5 votes.
She would. Yeah. Well, you're breeding your own voters, right? Yeah. So you guys are, the beginning stages of building real estate, and you pretty much go right from, here's the leap. And this is what I love about how big you think, Bo. You went from selling 6 homes to, I'm gonna buy brokerages and create this brokerage business, and Kymber's like, I'm gonna help grow this team. What's the progression in there?
Yeah, I think the progression, and I always talk about, and we talk about this wealth building continuum, that there's this progression from trading your time and talent for building up a financial resource, to the second stage where you take time, talent, and your resource, your money, and you invest it to make money. And then maybe further on the road where you just invest money to make money, and the money kind of works on its own. For us, the sales business was that launching pad. And so we made a deal when we got in the business. We both came out of the nonprofit world. And I said to Kimber, I said, well, we live just fine on our nonprofit salaries. I had just gotten a raise before I left the nonprofit world. I thought I was making big money, right? And I was like, this is great. I don't need money. I've never been very money focused. But I said, basically, hey, we can live off our salary. So let's set ourselves up on the same salary we had in the nonprofit world when we get in our business. And then everything else we make, we can invest in sort of building the organization, building the company, making an impact in our community. And I think we did that for the first 7 or 8 years. We paid ourselves the same salary. So Kimber was like the best ROI on a hire you could ever have, because she was like selling like 150 houses and getting paid, I don't know, like $60,000 or something like that. So it was an intentional decision to live below our means and to take that money and invest it. But it wasn't always easy. I mean, I always tell people when I talk about this gradually then suddenly, I talk about this can't point in that progression of things that happen gradually then suddenly. There's this point where you've been at it a long time. It's before the hockey stick growth happens. It's just the time where you put in the most effort, the most time, and seeing the least reward. I think for us, it was right after our first child, our first son was born. He was probably, I don't know, 1-year-old or something like that, Braxton. And we were working really hard. Kimber's going at it, baby in tow, showing houses. I'm trying to grow this brokerage. We're in the middle of a recession, global recession, 2009, 2010. And we had this conversation where we were kind of like, is this worth it? Like, what are we doing? Kimber's like, we're not, you're working 100 hours a week. You're supposed to be easier. This is way harder. We don't have anything more for our family. We've got this child that we're supposed to be taking care of. Like, what are you doing? And, it was very, I almost was like, oh, let's go get a job, we'll stop this. And the next 2 years after that, though, the company grew more than it had in the first 7 years combined. And then 2 years after that, it tripled in size.
Where were you putting the money?
It was that inflection point. What'd you say? Sorry. And
where did the money go? If you were making that much income for your business and you were essentially bootstrapping capital, where did that go? What were you putting it towards?
Businesses and real estate.
Okay. What businesses were you building?
We opened the first market center in Washington, D.C. By that time, we had opened a second market center in Fairfax, Virginia, and a third market center in Bethesda, Maryland. So we'd opened 3 market centers. We had bought a number of commercial properties in our neighborhood to try to revitalize a little street called 12th Street, where there's a lot of retail. And then we had invested in a condo building that we delivered right in the middle of 2007. And we had built up this portfolio of rental properties. And in the long run, that's actually what created the most opportunity for us. It was an opportunity to go forward in that. Sorry, hold on a second. I got to plug
it. We're charging.
Oh. I find this interesting because you guys, how old were you when all this was happening?
25 to 26, 27.
It is very unusual. I would call you outliers that you were at a point where you were investing in commercial properties, owning multiple businesses, and doing all of this at that age. In your 20s. It's unbelievable.
I think people don't want to get started, right? People always think we don't have enough to get started. And I think the thing that changed our trajectory was we just got started. And today, the property that we bought back then that seemed huge to us, but now that's appreciated in value. It's been able to be refinanced. It's created a home for a business. And so we've had a lot of people don't have an asset base to lean back on. And I think in times like this, that asset base creates an opportunity. It creates opportunity. It also creates resiliency, that you can make it through ups, you can make it through downs. There's a resiliency to that asset base. And I think too many people in the real estate sales industry see the beautiful income that they can make, and that income passes right through them and it goes off into the lifestyle and the things that they have. And then when it stops, they don't have the way to continue.
Yeah, because we're going almost 20 years in, between 15 and 20 years from this time we're talking about. Have you held most of the rental properties and commercial properties that you bought then? Do you still own them?
Yes, and I'm seeing the benefit and also paying the price right now. I'm in the middle of, we have 81 different properties, 250 commercial tenants. So we are going through right now with the team. We're calling every small business, every little restaurant that's closed, and every fitness provider that's out of business, and we're trying to help them get their PPP loans and help them figure out how they're going to restart their business. So it's been, yes, we have hardly sold anything through all those years.
Nothing. Yeah. I live in the single family, the rehabs. Yeah. I think in that point, Via, like, because we were in our early 20s and there wasn't a lot of liability, right? We were creating this even before we had children. There wasn't a lot of, like, you didn't know what you didn't know, right? It's like that unconscious incompetence. And so the idea that, like, we were going to open a brokerage in Washington, D.C., and this is in 2004 or 5, like, it was just your big boy players. And the idea, like, here we show up as these, like, 20-year-olds, like, we're going to open an office and we're going to make it the #1 office in Washington, D.C. And we just didn't know. And so in some ways it allowed there to be no cap on what was possible. And so you just went for it. And I think that in the beginning, like, sometimes I say that, I'm like, I don't know that we would take those risks today that we were, like, willing to just jump on 20 years ago. Yeah, he would have.
Would you guys say that the parents you're describing so far don't sound like they necessarily are high risk caliber? Would you say that, how would you describe your relationship with money? I'll ask you that way, growing up.
Yeah, I always tell the story of my mom, because it's the best example I can think of. So when I was a kid, I was a very entrepreneurial little kid, and I worked really hard. I had all sisters, so I got to do all the dirty jobs, all the work. I was the guy. So I had a paper route, right? So I'm like 11 years old, and I got a paper route in the neighborhood, and I'm in New England. So snow shoveling's like, the big money's in snow shoveling, not in paper routes.
Okay, good to know.
And so I decided that if you could cross-sell everybody on your paper route to also be in snow shoveling, it was a great opportunity, because the issue with snow shoveling is you got, while you were shoveling one walk, the other neighborhood kids could go around and get the next walk. And so you couldn't have like a monopoly on snow shoveling where you could on. So I got this deal where I shovel everyone on my paper route got a fixed price for shoveling their walk. So there's going to be a big storm in New England. And I'm like, okay, great. It's going to be like one of these, it's not like a DC blizzard where they close down if there's like one flake of snow, like a New England storm where like the world's going to shut down. So I'm getting excited. I get up. It usually takes me about most of the day to shovel the walks. So I get up early, and it's this huge wet snowstorm. And so I go out and I start shoveling. I work really, really hard, and I start telling my clients, hey, it's a really big snowstorm, but if you don't mind, pay me $20 instead of $10 like you normally pay me. So I get everyone to pay me $20. I come home at like 8 o'clock at night, exhausted and so happy. I'm like 11 years old. I made like $400. I'm like, yeah, this was great. And my mom sits me down and she says, young man, you didn't work any longer today than you normally work when you shovel snow. And it's not right that you charge the people extra money. It's an honest day's wage for an honest day's work. Now go back and give them back their money. And I'll never forget that my mom made me go back and give them back that money. And still today, Kymber knows that I have like a hard time like leaving the office if other people are still working. Because I still have this burden of guilt that I should be the one who works harder, who does more, who pushes harder. So I think that's we all have these money struggles that we have in our head that usually came from somewhere, oftentimes well-intentioned from our families, but that's one that I don't forget.
Would you tell your kids to return the money if they went and did that?
No, I'd be happy if my kids just worked that hard.
I'm with you there.
My kids need a little discipline to work that hard.
There. Wow. Kymber, what was your childhood relationship with money?
Yeah, I have two, similar to Bo, like, right, both of us, my dad was a fireman, my mom's a teacher, and both of Bo's parents are sort of educators. And so this idea that, like, you really, like, you work to have a life and have a stable sort of livelihood for your family, but that's it, right? There was not this aspiration of, like, bigger investments or creating wealth. Like, right, you worked enough, and then you'd retire, and, like, you'd hopefully have a retirement that would let you sort of live out the rest of your days. And so this idea of, like, you get a job and you stay there for like 30 years, and ideally it's a public servant job. And so when Bo and I were, that was how we met, right? That's how we started. We were both in the nonprofit world. And so our parents were, all four of them, not excited about this idea that we were going to, like, abandon, like, a social service mission oriented careers to go do something like entrepreneurial, or like what are you doing? And so it was interesting, I think, in the beginning, particularly, like, just this resistance to the idea that what we were doing actually could have an impact on the world. And, like, what kind of money was it? Why did you need to have this bigger vision for money in your life?
What's your answer to that?
Well, I think for us, like, we really saw it as this idea of being social entrepreneurs. Because what we found in the nonprofit world is that we had organizations that we were really passionate about, that were doing really good work. But at the end of the day, if somebody else who had money and resource didn't think that the work that we were doing was valid or good, you actually couldn't live out that mission. And so we said, well, in a business, if you are a social entrepreneur, could you be having an impact while also creating income? And you might not make as much, right? Because you were going to pour it into a place that had a social benefit, but that it actually was sustainable. And so I think for us, really, even when you think about our journey, it was very hyper local. It was like we believed that the community we were living in had value, and it was value that not everybody else believed. Like, we were the home to most of the realtors in Washington, D.C. None of them claimed to live here because it wasn't identified as a hip neighborhood or an affluent neighborhood. And so this is where they could afford to live, but they actually did their businesses in other parts of town. And so we said, no, we're actually going to claim to be here. This is where we are. We're going to be proud to be here. We're going to invest in this neighborhood in a way that allows the people who live here to recognize the financial benefit of it. And so I think that is an anchor of what I think the business, both from the residential side and the development side, created.
We had this opportunity, right, in the nonprofit world to see organization that that was tremendously impactful, but unless it could figure out a financially sustainable way to do what it was doing, it couldn't actually have the impact. And so oftentimes we get excited about solutions, but those solutions that don't work at scale because they're not scalable. So if it costs me, $200,000 to educate a kid and I do a really good job, that's actually not a solution because it's not a scalable solution for the rest of the society. So I was really passionate about how you could scale impactful solutions. And so business was really interesting to us because it had to be able to regenerate itself. And that way, if you came with a good idea and you could make it work, it could grow. Whereas in the other one, you had to just keep pouring more resource into it. I always say that there's three main things in life, right? There's government, there's the philanthropic and nonprofit world, and there's business. And they're all critically important and do amazing work to make our lives work. And we're seeing them all at play right now, right? Mm-hmm. But there's one thing that you have to remember about business. The government depends on taxes to survive. Philanthropy depends on charitable giving to survive. Business is the only thing that can introduce new prosperity into that mix, into that ecosystem. Business is the only thing that can add new resource to the table. So if business doesn't see itself as a contributor to the quality of life and the impacts that all those things have, then it's missing its point. It's the thing that has to generate more for that ecosystem to work. And if it can do that in an impactful and beneficial way, you can solve actually some of the toughest problems that are out there.
When do you think you switched from, I want to fix up my neighborhood and to I want to build wealth and a net worth?
I don't think we switched.
Yeah,
I think we're still, maybe we switched from build my neighborhood to build neighborhoods, right? But I personally think wealth was a byproduct of the passion that we had to do something important. It was also probably benefited from an early strategy that pulled the best of both worlds, right? We were salespeople, which is one of the best ways to make income, and then we were buying hard assets. And the combination of those two things that we did originally just to be safe, because that was my fear, like, we're gonna not be safe if we don't do this, right? Actually was a powerful combination that grew. But that wealth is a byproduct of the purpose. That was never the goal and never the purpose. It was this thing that happens on the side.
Yeah, that's what's important, right? That you never were driven by the wealth, that you were driven by the impact and what you could do. Money is good for the good it can do, you know?
Yep. And I think that's actually what drives us today, right? Because we sometimes will say, you know, we could stop all of this. Like, we could stop all of this. You could sell you could go find an island and raise our boys. And yet we believe, right, part of this opportunity that we've been given, it requires us to continue, one, to help other people recognize that opportunity and to continue to have that impact across the broader platform. And so I think that's I think we're very grateful for that position. But we also realize that was never why we were doing it. And so it's what actually allows you to continue to get up and work, right? We just talked about this the other night, like work round the clock to make sure that other people coming behind you and beside you are going to continue to have opportunity.
You start to understand, like, Kymber doesn't like this story, but one of my favorite stories of Kymber is there was a day I was really feeling sick, and I'm not like a big sick whiner. And so I'm in bed in the morning and I'm whining about, I don't feel good. And Kymber, I thought, like, maybe she'll bring me some tea. She'll say, "How you doing, honey?"
I'm not that girl.
She's like, no. She's like, "Hey, this isn't really about you, right? There's 1,000 people, whatever agents we have that count on you. This isn't about you. So get your butt out of bed and go to work." And I went to her.
I think you're just whining.
That's the type of support I get in my household. But I went to work that day, and that was the day that we passed. It was probably 5 years ago that we passed $1 million a week being paid out to the people that were working in the company.
Wow! And
it struck me that that's just a number on paper. But what does $1 million mean? It means how many kids are educated, how many elderly parents are taken care of, how many vacations does it fund, how many rental payments or mortgage payments does it pay, how many second homes how many experiences come from that, how much basic necessities get provided by it. And you started to feel, I actually got an obligation. Maybe Kymber was kind of right. This is really about what the business does impactfully, but also what it does for all the people that are involved in it and how it fuels their lives.
How would you describe the calling you have for your lives?
That's an Oprah-worthy question. Well done, Via. I think this idea, we've been talking about this a lot more recently, and it does go back to that college summit, that tagline, right? Like, let talent shine. Like, we believe part of what, I believe for our world, that it's been about discovering value where other people don't see value, in people, in communities, in careers, and really allowing those to shine, and not assuming that we're coming in to create value, that there's already value there. And what we're just doing is like uncovering it so that the rest of the world can see it. And I think, Brooklyn, which is sort of our laboratory in Northeast DC, is such a beautiful case for that, because, we started we knew that there was so much here, so much value, so much resource. And today it's one of the hottest neighborhoods in Washington, D.C. And so being able to be a small part of allowing that to be seen by the world is something that I think we're really proud of. And we look, now looking to replicate that across the country.
Yeah, like our mission, right, of transforming lives, careers, and communities through real estate, it's fundamentally about transformation, but I think it's this idea that you can identify talent and assets in human beings that can allow them to build careers they never thought they could have, in buildings that could be brought back to life. That's been a lot of our work in the development side, and in communities that have tremendous community assets that are oftentimes perceived in a negative light. So what's the opportunity not to sort of start from zero and a blank slate, but to paint in an existing canvas with the existing fabric and to fill in, to highlight, and to accentuate things that are strong, that exist in communities and that elevate and lift people up. So how do we bring that to what we're doing? And I think that comes from this, like, still like little kids with a chip on their shoulder, that it's not fair. Nobody sees the talent of those people. Nobody sees that that community's good. There is that little, like, let the damn talent shine that's underneath it all.
You know, it's interesting. Both of you answered that, and it's one theme, and it's value where others don't see value, whether that's talent or, you know, your development work or real estate or neighborhoods or whatever it is. You both, it's fascinating. You both came at that with the same angle. So it almost feels like a filter and a framework from which you view your business and your life, perhaps. Fascinating.
Yeah, absolutely.
Do you guys talk about business at home?
More than we should.
More than is necessary.
Okay. So
we used to. So it used to be that we would build house. We were getting started. I'd build a house and Kymber would be selling it. And we would like argue about the like contract details in the bed every day.
The negotiation.
I can't, you know, I've worked for a lot of builders, and if a builder was my husband, builders and real estate agents, you know, there is. So, okay, so let's go there. What are the rules of engagement for the Menkiti power couple? What are the rules of engagement that make this whole thing work? You guys have 4 kids, you have a very lively household, and a very big empire. How does that work?
So I think for me, one of the pieces that is critical is I have to sometimes say to Bo, like, okay, in this example, you are just going to be my husband. You're just going to listen. You're not going to solve it. You're not going to take it personally. You're not going to hear the criticism. Like, because I just sometimes need to vent about something that happened during the day. And I don't need you to be like.
Bo is literally biting his mouth closed right now.
Exactly. This literally happened last night. I was like, I don't need you. I just need to say it, and I just need you to hear it. And so we do have to like literally qualify the statement to say, like, this isn't a problem solving exercise. This isn't like let's dig into strategy on the business at 11 o'clock at night. Let's just like decompress about our day, and that might overlap with something you did to it.
And I think part of it is that we share, one of the things that works and is also very frustrating and challenging at times is that we share like a big picture purpose for the world, and that we're very aligned on that. And then we're also very different people. Like I'm about as fiery and as emotional and hot as they come, and Kymber is about as reserved and stone-faced as they come, right? And if I came home, my preference would be to like hash out the world's problems and talk about this deep stuff. And Kimber's like, can we just talk about like what goes on the recent Netflix? And I'm like, we're not going to talk about Tiger King. We're gonna solve the world's problems, you know. And so it's kind of funny to see, but I think being able to, when it works really well, it's when we're able to shift between the roles and to use that shift to support rather than to hurt or to harm, but to use it to support the other person in what they're doing.
What advice would you have for other married couples that are, working together and obviously married?
Early on, we actually, because we were on a very vertical urban space, we had different floors. And so even today, like in our physical space, we're sitting together right now. But
my office, though.
In his office. We were on separate corners of the building. So I think for us worked really well. And I think it's totally, varies from people in the industry, but having our own like lanes in the business and even spaces so that we're not proximity-wise with each other all day long and then with each other all evening really helped. And having just, like, we had different strengths. Like Bo was focusing on development and building out the brokerages, and I, for 10 years, ran our sales team. And so we literally had our places inside the business that allowed us to like shine and have strengths and to focus, and then be able to sort of pivot from that into the other world. And so I think that really makes sense.
Yeah, I think there's different types of couples, right? There's some couples, and we've seen some in real estate, who do a phenomenal job kind of working really closely together. They, one's the yin to the yang. They flow with each other. They enjoy being around it. I think that I learned early on that the aspiration and independence of my wife was not something that would thrive in that type of here we go, let's go do the listing together, honey. So the space has created for us an opportunity for people to build a joint but also independent identity and success.
So I'm hearing jurisdictional boundaries, essentially, that you're just really clear on that, and then you're labeling the hats that you're wearing. Hey, this is our parent hat. This is our marriage hat. This is our husband and wife hat. This is our team hat. This is our brokerage or business hat. Yeah, I get that. Are you guys, creating an empire for your children to take over or work in? Is that part of the legacy you'd like to see?
I think so. It's interesting. We are obviously, right, all the kids have extremely different personalities, but it's interesting to see them think about, we have one that's really interested in design and architecture, and one who is probably going to be a phenomenal salesperson. And so I do think we hope that they see a path, that in the business, or just as a learning ground for life, right? I think it doesn't have to be the end game for them, but I think definitely to see that. And I think ultimately, I see our legacy as our people that are with us right now. We got a lot of people this is definitely not ours. This business today, Bo birthed it. I feel like I raised it, and today we have people who are tending to it that love it as much as we do. And I think that's probably one of the things that we're most proud of.
Yeah, and I think for the kids, just thinking about them. So I took our son, one of the most fun things I did today is we have a son, Carter. He's the middle child who's different than the rest of the sons, who doesn't love sports, isn't loud, he's quiet and thoughtful. And he always says he's been designing his dream house at home out of cardboard boxes for a long time. And so he went and walked one of our properties the other day with me, and he took measurements and he recreated a replica of a house, and it was cool. So I guess I say that to say what my hope is for our sons is that they find things that they're passionate about, things that they care about, things that they give themselves to the degree that they can become great at it. And so I would hope that the legacy we leave for our kids is that they are well-grounded and can pursue what they're passionate about. And if that happens to be in the business, great. If it doesn't, great. The business can be that for lots of other people. There's a lot of other people for whom this business is something that can drive them into the future.
Yeah. What are you teaching them about wealth? What would you say your kids' mindset is about wealth?
I think we got some work to do in that one. I think what we've been trying to do, I'll tell you what I've been trying to do recently, is get them to understand the correlation between money, effort, and what things cost. That's been a big thing. So last week, I was getting my oldest son to calculate how much it costs to feed the family for the week.
Oh,
because he's telling me, well, he would just get a job. So we went and looked at what do jobs pay? What kind of job could he get if he worked at the local supermarket, or he was doing this, or his favorite place, Dunkin' Donuts? Mm-hmm. Then what would that mean? And how many days of the week could he feed the family? And so there's things like that, 'cause I think the kids lack perspective on how things relate. And so they have these assumptions and presumptions, like most of us as adults, oh, that person's wealthy, that person's not. You see this in Keller Williams all the time. Oh, that guy's great. But people have no idea what's actually the real story is. And so I think trying to get people to have some sense about that is important.
Do you have a long-term vision, I should say, a 10 or 20-year vision?
What's our 20 years?
I know. I feel like probably not as 20 as we would want. You could be 60. Yeah. I feel like we've looked at these 5-year increments, and one of the things that we've done that's really, I think, been effective in the business is sort of taking these 1 and 5-year and 10-year goals and saying, what do we want the business to look like? And really being able to move in that direction. And we know, right, you often underestimate the long term and overestimate on the short term. And so how do you say that? We've watched ourselves set 5-year goals for us and nail them in 3. And so I think that part of it has been this pivot to say, there's things that we wanted about the business, and a lot of those have come to life, right? Like those are at play. And so now it's saying, okay, well, what does everyone else want for their lives around us, and how does the business become the vehicle to get that? So I think one of the big things for us is really thinking about, like, how do we allow other people to own the outcomes of the businesses and continue to drive it forward.
You think about it, right? We were talking this the other day. We had written this like letter to myself when we started the company and opened it 10 years later. And I'd written this thing that said, you know, how great would it be in 10 years to have the business be at a place where I could go back. That's when I actually thought I would become a politician. Yeah. And I would go back and do something in public service. And I said, and you could see I was thinking, and I wrote ... my bad handwriting. Or wouldn't it be great to do it all over again with what you've learned and the resources you've gained over 10 years? And so I think right now it's about doing it all over again, but not us doing it all over again. It's about using what we've done so far to be a stepping stone to let people more talented, more capable, and more ambitious potentially than us jump on our shoulders, use it as a boost to go where they're going to go. So now I think the vision for us is to transition. Like we've both been, and maybe I'm a little more older and jaded than Kymber, but like
definitely older,
only by a couple of years. So this idea though that me proving that I can do it again doesn't prove anything right now. The question is, can we figure out a system that lets others do it and that supports them and what they can do? And so I think the next phase, the next chapter for us is more of a chapter of being that stepping stone, that boost, that step that helps propel others forward within the ecosystem that's been created and expands that ecosystem into new things.
What do you guys think are your most important habits that have gotten you to the place you're at now?
One that I resisted for a lot of years was just the sort of living in the schedule world, right? Like having, especially right now in these last 8 weeks, like it has been 100% live by the schedule. And that looks like sometimes like, right, time blocking out the activities we want to do with the kids, time blocking out the like exercise time, like time blocking out the things that are important. And I just think that's such a critical piece because you can get derailed really quickly when it's not really clear, and that it matches back to the goals that you have for yourself, and what you can go back and look and say, well, where did I spend my time? And that tells you a lot. So I think that for both of us, that's a habit that has took me a little longer to adopt the Bo, but just really having that commitment to what you put on the schedule to be able to drive that has been a big one for me. Habits.
I don't know if this is a habit, but I think this combination of being short-term impatient and long-term patient. I am like as fired up, probably too much. I think they would tell me definitely too much, but I'm the most impatient dude on a daily basis. But if you look at some of the things that have been most impactful in our lives, they're things we worked on for years that we stayed with well long after most other people would have given up and thrown in the towel. And so combining urgency and activation with sustained grit against longer term goals, I think is a really important component of what has worked for us over the last 15 years.
Are you guys satisfied with your life so far?
No.
I think I knew you were going to say that. Yeah. Tell us more about that.
Like I would like to, I'll tell you for me, I'd like to better, I know the gear of all out forward motion in business. So I'd love to develop more of the gear. I have a huge appreciation for human connection and engagement. And those two things are always in conflict with each other. And I'd love to make them not in conflict with each other. So that's one big thing. And then I'd love to find the balance of how we continue to grow and evolve as a couple, as parents, and as business people. I think that the same way there's a rounding out of us being performers. I think that it's time in our life for us to start to cede the stage and to let others take the stage, and use that time to also do some of the things that we sacrifice, some of the time we've had together, the time with children. So I guess I say that to say we have a wonderful life, and there's a lot of benefits to it, but there's a lot of things, there's a lot of sacrifices in it. It's not as pretty as it looks on Facebook.
Will you ever be content, Kymber?
I don't know that I will. I think that there's a part of, like, you got to just sometimes know that inner, like, drive. And so it's one of those things, because we talk about that, right? Like, why wouldn't we just sell everything and go live on the beach for, the next 10 years? And I think that it is, because there is that lack, that sort of inner drive. And you have to, I think in a lot of ways, you have to push it down sometimes to allow to be fully connected to the other things in your life. And I think when you have two highly driven people who actually enjoy their work, that can be really challenging. And so that is definitely a place for us that there's a lot of continued growth, to be able to make sure that we're taking care of self, we're taking care of each other, we're taking care of our family, while also continuing to drive in the professional side.
Yeah, and you know why I asked you, because I know you both well, and especially Kymber, and you are two of the hardest working people I know. And I'm curious, what the inner drive looks like for someone that continues to work that hard and that much. When you could, I have an idea of your net worth just based on all of your assets, when you clearly could go move on to an island and do whatever. So I think it's fascinating. So last question, in our last few minutes, what do you each think your superpowers are?
So I think this ability, like, I tend to, like, be super calm under pressure. And so I think, like, in high stress situations, like, I think I can be a bit of a magician to sort of be able to put it all together, and to just help navigate in a really sometimes chaotic or stormy situation. So that ability to, like, be calm and help steady the ship, I think, is one thing that
I've seen you do that, Kymber. That's a true statement. What about you, Bo?
Well, I think it's probably something between really having the ability to look forward and anticipate and see the future and what's coming. I think I tend to live out in front. I live out down the road a little bit. My mind lives down the road, and see that future. And then the ability to triangulate the information around that and pull the information and numbers together that are part of.
Well, I asked a couple of your close friends and associates what they thought your superpowers are. Are you interested in hearing that?
I don't think we have a choice, do we?
Probably not.
I'm interested in Kymber telling me what she thinks my superpowers.
Well, I'm not going to have a chance to go through all of them, and I want to thank all the people who participated, but they echo a lot of what you guys are saying. Joseph Martin, I call him Joe. Joseph Martin, Kymber, your ability to energize and amp up a room immediately with your personality. And Bo, Energizer Bunny, the dude has a motor that doesn't stop. Dante Carroll said that Bo's superpower is an ability to see the beginning, middle, and end of something all at once, to see the vision. Exactly what you said. I mean, he sees you in the present, you see yourself in the future. But Dante also thinks Kymber's superpower is a concentrated positive energy. I really like that. Sarah Reynolds, I think, really nailed Kymber's strength with calmness at the same time, which is really rare. And Bo, she thinks you have a huge presence. Brandon Green, Bo, seeing the big picture and connecting all the dots. And that's what I put basically for you. That's how I see you. You see the big picture, and you really are good at creating frameworks and seeing patterns and seeing a path to success, I think. Brandon thinks, Kymber, that your superpower is engendering loyalty. Seychelle Van Poel also thinks you're a magnetic force, Bo. So we're getting a lot of that you have a big presence. And Seychelle thinks Kymber makes it look so easy. She has a grace and steadiness about her that's unmatched. She has brains and beauty. I agree with you, Seychelle. Wendy Papazan, Bo, strategic vision. So this is a theme coming up that everyone's seeing in you. Kymber, servant leadership, which is awesome. Katie Heaton thinks you are bionic woman, Kymber. So do I. She thinks you're calm under pressure and the master of coordination with grace and ease. And she goes on. And I'll send these to you guys. Bo, you are Yoda to her. She thinks you're Yoda, the pinnacle of a Jedi. And she went on and on too. So there's a lot more in here that I didn't have a chance to read, but you guys have a huge amount of people in your world that think really highly of you. And I think that you're really role models for all of us in marriage and in business and in parenthood and in giving back to our communities, the full package. It is the reason I wanted to interview you. So thank you so much for giving me an hour, a precious hour of your guys' day. And thank you to everybody here for joining us.
Thanks, Via.
Thank you.
It's awesome.
Thank you, you guys.
Yeah.
Bye.